We have arrived to the summer of 2015 in our timeline, and it is an action-packed summer. We start off with VBS, which leads into something super cool and fun that Brandi and Melissa implement into children's ministry that goes on for about the next year. Also, we don't do the big summer park event this year, which leads to some questioning as to what is really happening with all of that money that has been set aside, especially when Tom is building a new house, finishing his basement and putting in a pool and hot tub, and the church is putting up a new electronic sign out front. You won't want to miss this episode.
Faith can feel like hearts and butterflies until someone lights a match and burns it all to the ground. Welcome to the Burning Butterflies podcast.
The sad thing is that there's abuse of every kind within the church. But the spiritual abuse is the stuff that just
What's a place there shouldn't be abuse? Like, there just shouldn't be abuse in a place that claims Jesus.
Well, it ruins your soul. If you're new here, we suggest listening to our prologue episode first. This is the story of two women's journey through spiritual abuse and escaping from toxic church culture while finding hope in Christ.
Sometimes it's just the facts, and if you get offended by it, that's a you issue. And if we can't be mature enough to have these conversations, even if some of the topics are difficult, then shame on us.
We start off our summer how we are going to start off every summer for the rest of our time at Come As You Are. We are starting with VBS. And we have two VBSs under our belt. The first one we do towards the end of the summer, and we discovered that being outside with toddlers and children at the end of July really sucks. Like, it is not fun for anyone involved. And so we decide that we are going to get it over with. Honestly, like, that's the talk, like, of the people who lead VBS. Like, let's just get it over with right after school. Like, we're just going to, like, as soon as school is over, like, that's going to be one of the first things we do. And then we have the rest of the summer to just, like, write it out. So we are, like, first, second week of June, we are VBSing. And this year, it is hot as balls outside. And we pick a theme that is all snow and ice. We do Everest, climbing life's challenges with God or something like that.
Yeah.
Was the vibe. For this VBS, all of us are very involved in this VBS. And Brandi and I are working very closely, working very well with the director of children's ministry. She's kind of heading up the whole thing, and we are coming alongside. I did all of the registration this year, because remember, the year before was Agency D3, where we have all these kids show up that we weren't prepared for. So Type A, Amanda, took the job, and we were overly prepared. I was ready for 400 kids to walk in that door. I had everything ready to go. And, like, I think if we had 175, it would be, that'd be a stretch. But, I did all of the registration, and then I did the, like, what did they call it? Where, like, you come in and KidVid, like, the kids would come in,
yeah,
and we'd watch a little video that was put on by, like, the VBS company, the little kit that we bought, and they'd watch a video and then we'd talk about it. Yeah, that's what I did. What were you gals doing during this VBS?
Kindergarten and below. So kindergarten and preschool were participating in VBS. I think at this VBS, we said you had to be potty trained, which meant you had to be able to pull your pants and underwear down, up, and button and zip your pants by yourself.
And you had to be able to wipe yourself. Like, I remember this was a whole conversation of like, how do we say you have to be able to do all of that, like in a very like professional way? And I think we did, like, they have to
we did public school kindergarten rules.
Yep. They have to be able to use the restroom fully independently, because we're not wiping it.
So we had basically 4 to 6 year olds participating in our own kind of VBS. And then I also was working with the people that were going to take care of the staff member kids and getting activities and all of that ready and where they were going to be. And I believe we still were only on one side of the building. We were only in the nursery and the 2-year-old room at this point.
Yeah. And you guys got the cafe area. So,
yeah.
So
we had our cafe area was like our sanctuary / crafts. And then we went outside for our games.
With the tent and the snow fence.
Yes. And then I was more in charge, so we were running more cohesive with the main VBS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we did that because it was such a disaster the year before for you guys. And like, there was too many kids. We had too many kids for the amount of the adults that we had there at ages ED3. And so we really tried hard to like, okay, if we do have 80 kindergartners show up again, what are we going to do with them? And we really tried to have a better plan.
And we wanted them to have the experience of the actual VBS.
Yeah, I was going to say, wasn't this, like the first year that we really incorporated like the whole program of like the early, like we really took an early education stance on like, we're going to offer a program. It's its own program, but we're going to incorporate it in. And I just thought I just remember thinking it was like ingenious, like just the way, because of the logistics of the church and how like the younger kids anyway are separated at some point, and like just the way you could block off that whole area. Like I thought it was really good the way that was done.
Well, and I always was pushing that we can't leave this section of kids out. Because it was always very easy to just be like, oh, they're little, they'll get their turn eventually.
Yeah.
So, and at this point in time, we were still unaware that there was that major publishing companies always had a big kit for like 1st through 5th grade, but there's also a small kit available for kindergarten and under that runs you can run it side by side and do worship together. And at this point in time, we're still not aware this exists. So
we're still not aware that we're still not aware that there is registration software.
You know what's so strange about that is like, this was not like the 1990s. This was not 1987. Like we're in the modern world at this. I mean, this is 2015, right? The world didn't crash in Y2K, and like there has been this software technology for maybe like 20 years by this point. And just the gap in the like this church operated at 1987 level in 2015 is ridiculous to me, like to think about, like, and we thought we were cutting edge.
Oh yeah. Like, no, we are doing such great that we are leading the way in churches. People look at us to look at what churches should be doing, and I am building crap in Excel spreadsheets.
Like we were so impressed with these VBS kits, and like you think of what was actually available versus what we were so impressed with, and like it's so funny to me.
If you think about it, the women in this church left the workforce in the late 90s, early 2000s, and we don't think we're in this church world so much that we don't think anything else is, like, why would we think anything else is available? I had to make spreadsheets at work. The software was expensive, and that's our thought too, is everything is so expensive.
Yeah.
And just to put into perspective, at this point in time, and for at least another 2 years, the church office is using Microsoft Access to keep track of that is their big database of people. Microsoft Access.
Well, and I guess maybe understanding that there are churches that their entire platform is run on a digital basis of like, you walk in at this point, like you are walking in with your kids to children's ministry, putting in your phone number. It is popping out a name tag on a printer right next to that computer. And that's the first time you walk into some churches. Like they're like, yeah, just put your information in our computer. And they have like kiosks where people walk in, and like this is happening at this time in churches. Like churches are progressing forward in using the technology that's available. And here we are with paper and pen. Might as well have been stone and chisels.
On Sunday mornings, I'm doing check-in. Like that's my ministry, is I'm doing preschool check-in on the little kid end. And I am hand making name tags for children.
Yeah. So funny. VBS though, I was leading worship and doing sound, so that was, I think this one had its own videos. And so we would just learn because Agency D3 had its own videos, and we learned all the dances, and then we would get up and do it. I think Everest did too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'd put on videos and isn't this the one though? Like they really, I feel like, isn't this the one where like a lot of the curriculum came with a digital package? So if we didn't have a storyteller, we could use their video, and they had a storyteller.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because this was from Group
So
Publishing.
it's like an all done for you. And they had like local kids too that were in their videos, because this is the one with music videos. Yeah.
Yes, it's done really well.
Yeah, so
we did gymnastics with one of the girls that was in the video.
Yeah, because Group Publishing is local in northern Colorado. And so that when they put out, because I actually applied to have Jolynn be in the video, but she was too little at the time. They wouldn't take her because you had to be upper elementary age, and she was
well, they look like middle school.
Yeah. And so but a lot of them are in the homeschool community and stuff like that. And so some of the homeschool families in our church knew kids in the videos from their homeschool community and things like that. But Agency D3 was through Lifeway, and so Group Publishing's VBS, their kits just had a whole lot more resources that came with them than Lifeway's did at the time. I'm sure things have changed since then. I mean, we're talking 10 years ago now, but Group Publishing really did have a lot of resources. So if you didn't have, their whole thing was it's more important to have people with the kids and following with the kids and building relationships with the kids than it is to have someone, a designated person standing on the stage to tell the story. So if you don't have a lot of adults, we'll take that part off your hands for you, and you just kind of take the kids from station to station.
And I really liked that they did the songs that they put with their VBS curriculum were real world worship songs, where with Agency D3 the songs were specific, they were Agency D3 songs. Some of them were really, really good, and I'm that needs to be a mainstream song. But and we used some of those songs, we got permission to use some of those songs throughout the years of with our kids worship. But with Everest, it's they took mainstream, like out there worship songs, and then had made videos, like music videos with the kids, and they put motions with it for your kids to learn. So that was pretty cool. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
Well, and they were smart because this generation of kids doesn't want to listen to an adult sit on the stage and tell a story. So when the kids were able to watch the story, they got a lot more out of it.
And we're able to kind of go all out. We buy posters, we decorate the whole stage. This is a whole production.
Yeah, you guys made the door look like a big igloo or something, right? Out of like milk.
Yep, we built. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, that was so awful.
I'm still mad. I am still
so that when you went in from the hot sun, you walked through this tunnel of ice into the cold Everest in the sanctuary.
Yeah, we cranked the AC up.
Moldy milk.
Yes, we cranked the AC up in the sanctuary, but this igloo tunnel that you walked through, we asked people to bring us empty milk jugs, gallon milk jugs. Like the smell, like PTSD, because we were gluing them together with hot glue. So imagine stinky milk jugs
you tried to wash them out, but people would just dump stuff. And they wouldn't rinse it out before they brought it. Mm-hmm. Like they would just bring, you wanted milk jugs. Here's like my 2 milk jugs for the week. And then you'd get there. You get there at the time and you're like, nobody washed this out.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, it's so last minute. I mean, we're talking like the Sunday, Sunday after church, we stay and we decorate. And like, there's a picture of Clayton and Johnny, me and Brandy's boys, standing in like this half-built igloo thing, and like, but we're taking these milk jugs because people are just bringing them, and so like that Sunday they're bringing them, and we had like a big box in the lobby that you could drop your milk jugs in, and so many people brought milk jugs that Sunday because it was like, this is your last day to bring milk jugs, and we had so many milk jugs that people brought us, and it was so last minute that we didn't have time to like look at stuff. And it's like, we're trying to build things. We went through, I bet you 100 pounds of hot glue because I mean, I know we broke 2 hot glue guns because we used them so much. They were plugged in for so long. They just
and then
burned up and died.
Signs up to help doesn't show up.
Yeah.
And my big thing was always, this is a great idea, but the execution is going to be enormous, and we're going to have 3 people executing it when it comes down to it.
Yeah, it was me, the woman whose idea it was. Like, she showed up, she worked the whole time. So it was me and her, and then like people would kind of like come and go, and they'd be like, oh, I want to help build the igloo, until they realize like you're heating up plastic that smells like rotten milk with hot glue, and then you have to like hold it together. And so people are only working for so long, and then they're like, yeah, I can't do this anymore. And we're like having to figure out, how are we going to get it to stand up in the doorway? And I forgot
every single time the Pinterest idea from this group of women
milk jug ice thing. That was awful.
I'm sorry. I thought it was great. Like
we put air fresheners in them to make it not.
Oh my God.
Yes, we did. We went and bought like fresh linen air fresheners or something.
Great job.
And because you would walk through and it smelled like rotten milk, and it was awful.
I didn't even notice. You guys did a great job at hiding that, because it was like, totally, you went from hot summer through the ice cave and into Everest. I believed it. I was there.
Yeah. But that's the kind of stuff that Tom would have lost his mind over. Walking through the church on a Sunday afternoon, he would walk through and be like, why are you doing that? You can't leave that up. And we have Thursday night service, and that was always a fight with him. of can we leave stuff up for Thursday night service? And our argument was people are going to want to see what the stage looks like. There's people who work who are not able to be a part of VBS. They're going to want to see what the stage looks like. They want to see the decorations. They want to see what the kids are experiencing
like people
all week.
Understand.
And Tom was so I fought really hard to be able to keep the igloo thing up for Thursday night. And Tom didn't even know it was there until Tuesday when he came in for worship practice, because we got to do so much that year unchecked. And it was kind of one of those like, well, we're going to do it. And then like, what's Tom going to do?
I didn't clean up the cafe
Ask
area.
for forgiveness.
What's Tom going to do?
Not permission. That becomes a motto
And
at this point.
that came from Charlotte. Charlotte would say it's better to ask for forgiveness than be told no when you ask for permission. And that was her mantra with dealing with her own husband. And so we were like, what's Tom going to do? Tell us to take it down? Okay, whatever. So we went all out because we were completely unchecked, because Tom is completely sidetracked, because this is the year they build a new house.
Yeah.
And so building that house, that was kind of Charlotte's consolation prize, because you talked about in one of our previous episodes, Melissa, about you guys went to this lake house.
Yes.
It's right after I married Froggy. So Pastor Tom and Charlotte have some friends that they've been friends with since like middle school, but they have a property on a lake on the East Coast. And then every other summer, like in August, we would go out there. And we did this for quite a few years. But there was one particular summer that we had gone out there, and Pastor Tom talked to a realtor and got listings. And we drove around and went and looked at properties on the lake, because of course, I mean, like, that happens naturally. You get to a certain age and you start thinking about, what do I want to do next? Like, what am I going to do? Do I want to retire? And I get that. So it became like, these is where their like very, very best friends live. And, you know, why would they not want to look for property and stuff out there and be like, do we want to, they're getting ready to retire. Maybe we should get ready to retire. And so we drove around and we went and we looked at houses, and they had very serious conversations about, is it time to retire, or is it time to take a step towards retirement? Because I don't think it was ever like, I'm going to come back from the summer vacation and, hey guys, I'm retiring and I'm moving out of state. I think it was, in 5 years, if I want to retire, in 10 years, if I'm going to retire, like, what is that going to look like? And if I buy a vacation home now, then in 5 years, in 10 years, it can be my retirement property. And in the time being, you rent it out, you know, becomes a vacation property for somebody else. You use it. And then when you are going to go on vacation, you don't have to A, stay at somebody else's house, or B, pay for accommodations. You have your own house. Makes total sense, right? Smart planning. And I think that was more of what the conversation was. But what it did was it opened up another conversation of Pastor Tom and Charlotte were living in a house that they bought. And at the time that they bought their house, there was another option, because they do live in a neighborhood with an amazing view of Longs Peak and the mountain range. I mean, sorry, if you've ever been in Colorado and you live where you can see the Rocky Mountains, it's absolutely stunning and beautiful and amazing. And if you can buy a house that sits up high enough where you have that view out your backyard, then God bless you, because you are like winning in life. Like, that's hashtag winning right there. And so the neighborhood that Pastor Tom and Charlotte live in sits up high enough that even if people build in the land around the hill that they're on, they're not going to block the view of the gorgeous mountain range and peaks I mean, these are Colorado's 14ers, and you can see them, like, it's beautiful. And so at the time when they bought their house, they debated between a house in the neighborhood and a house that was on the backside of the neighborhood, which was called like the Ridge. And so where you actually out your back door have the view of the mountain range. And at the time, they made a more conservative choice, and they bought the house that was in the neighborhood. So, but Charlotte really, 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 really wanted the view of the mountains. And you could tell, I mean, from the time that I met them, like that was always, it was never a secret. And it was just always a thing. Like that was her heart's desire, was to live where she could see the mountains. And so at this time, we went on this lake trip, and they have those conversations, but also the neighborhood that they live in, since they build neighborhoods in phases, had opened up one of the latter phases of the neighborhood building. And like, I just to be like, give you perspective of this, like people would knock on their door. This would be later on, after they built the new house. Realtors would knock on their door and be like, hey, I'm looking for I have a client who is looking for a house on the Ridge. If you're ever interested in selling, call me. Like they would get solicited, because to buy one of those houses, like they got bought up instantly. And then people don't sell them because it's like this like, I don't know. Yeah.
I just want to add something which I find funny. Tom stands on stage and tells us all not to live in the world.
I know.
happy with what we have. Don't be selfish. You need to be looking to God and serving others. Don't be looking at yourself. But you just said this is prime real estate. You are from like the West Coast. This is behind the gates living.
Oh yeah.
This is the elite for this
and like
area.
you had to jump through hoops to even get access. Like you were on a waiting list for years, waiting for that neighborhood section to open up, to be one of the top ones to be called, to be able to pick your lot. Like you said it, prime real estate. This is the prime real estate.
Yes. So I just think that's a funny contradiction.
Oh yeah. I've questioned that like a lot, like because the message from stage was so contradictory to like the actions of like, okay, like it's okay for you to pursue certain things and you always have an excuse for it. And it's like, okay, but like when you tell people who are like 3 times poorer than you and struggling, like you can't relate. Like you just can't relate. And you're trying to relate and be like, no, like Tom and Charlotte made choices in their life that put them in a financial position to be okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Exactly.
And Pastor Tom could be okay without being a pastor. Like they have made, and they, from a generation, like we got to be clear on this too. You have to understand that like up into a point, and I think their generation really is the last generation that benefited from how America was when it was the way it was. Like for us and for future generations, we no longer have the same financial opportunities that they have because the inflation numbers don't add up. You know, when like even for my parents, and my parents are older than like my parents and Charlotte's parents are the same age because I was adopted. So they bought houses that, yes, a house was expensive, but let's put this into perspective. They bought houses in the late 60s and in the 70s.
For $40,000,
and houses in the late 60s were like, $25,000 to $50,000 is what you were buying these amazing houses for. These houses now sell for millions of dollars, and you haven't worked on it since 1976. So it's absolute insanity. And so this generation, we don't have these same opportunities within the system that they grew up in this country. They made great decisions and did things the way you were supposed to, so that when you got to this age in retirement, you were taken care of. And so that's the situation that they're in. And so, yeah, on one hand, like if Pastor Tom was not a pastor, he would have been in the same situation that he was in regardless, and would have made all those same American dream decisions. You just now put this Christianity and church on it, so now we have this Christian American dream.
Right. The thing is, I made the same decisions they made from 2000 until now. Financially, I'm not set up the same way. It doesn't equal out. This is all erased from the stage, and it is sold as Tom picked up his cross every day and followed the Lord.
Yeah.
That is why, not because he had a retirement from the military, not because he had a good job. Stand on stage and tell somebody whose family for generations has lived in this area, has never owned a home, that if they pick up their cross and surrender, they can live on the ridge too.
Well, because what did Tom always say? They almost got foreclosed on. Like when we were building the building, Tom and Charlotte were behind on their mortgage. And like, that was one of the things, is that they, like, Tom never came out and said it, but it was heavily implied that they leveraged their house in order to build the building because they were all in. I don't think he ever did, because like we were selling these bonds, and it was like a big deal that someone bought Tom and Charlotte a bond, and it like meant the world to them and all of this and everything like that. But Tom would stand on stage and preach about how they were going to get foreclosed on, and he called the mortgage company, and he would call them, and he would be like, I want to pay you, I just don't have the money to pay you.
That happened long before he became a pastor. That story.
That talk never started. He never talked about that until we started building the building.
That's weird, because when he would tell that story, I could have swore he was talking about before, or like right when he was starting. That's weird. That's really weird. No, I'm not doubting you. I'm just saying, like, in my perspective, I'm not saying you're not wrong. I'm just saying, like, it's funny that your perspective is you took that story and you were like, he's talking about the time we were building the building. And I took that story and I'm like, he's talking about 5-6 years before that. Like, that's weird.
See,
no, she's talking live.
Like
in the moment.
Like, hearing him say that from stage, it felt like he was talking about it in real time.
Oh, yeah.
Like back when we were at the high school, I felt like he was I could be mistaken, because I mean, I was.
No, because
no. I had some crap going
that's
on.
a very valid point, though. No, but I mean, like, seriously, like, if you think about it, if you think about right now, think about all the stories that Pastor Tom tells from stage. There is never, and we did this too, you talk about something in such a way that it could be right now, but if you think about it, his stories are all 30 years old. Like, he doesn't have any new material. He never talks about what's going on currently unless it's something that politically moves the culture of the church along. So any of his personal stories, like, he makes it sound like, we talked about this. He makes it sound like last week he was in a church van picking up kids to take them to Sunday school so much that the youth pastor's at a park trying to solicit kids to go to church in 2023. Like, hello, but that story happened. You're in your 60s and we're talking about like when you were a teenager type stuff. Like, come on now. Like, so it doesn't surprise me that I'm not surprised. So I'm not calling you out. I'm saying that's so trippy because from my perspective and what I know, like, I didn't associate that with that time, but from what you know, you associated it with that time, and the story, none of us knows actually when that story happened.
Yeah.
Well, and I heard the story in reference to what happened to us, and I thought it happened in 2007, 2008.
Yeah, see, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's how it was. Like, when we actually sit down and you think about it, it's like, and we all did it too, where you're like, oh, I have experience in that. Let me tell you my story. But you would tell it in a way so that it wasn't dated. Like, you were trained to tell your stories that way. Like, I went through that, and then you want to bring your story into the present moment. Wow.
You just said it. You were trained. That is not something that we say flippantly. There was a part of Master Life where you are legit trained how to tell your story like that, and people would come in and role play. They would role play someone who was excited to hear your story. They would role play someone who was a skeptic and would ask, like devil's advocate type questions to you the whole time. We were legit trained to tell our stories like this. And it was all under the guise of, we are going to share the gospel with people and save them. No, it's not. We were taught how to feed people a line of crap.
And it was modeled. It was modeled in everything. In every Bible study you went to, the people who were learned and then regurgitating were teaching you and modeling to you that this is how you be vague enough that it can relate to anybody. And that was the biggest thing, I think, for all three of us, even doing this podcast, is we had to relearn how to say stuff without being vague. Like, because there's also a fear within you, like, oh, if I give too many details. And if you really think about our time at Come As You Are, everything was like that. All the stories. Like,
yeah, you always had to be vague.
Nothing was in real time. And what's currently going, or I did this last week, the story had to be told and then molded to fit the narrative before you were actually allowed to present the information. Like, your whole story, your whole life was curated. This is why people would come in, and people will see this as we go on when we tell these stories. We would have people come in and you would meet them, and they would be like, and it'd be like normal, right? Like, hey, Amanda, hey, Brandi, nice to meet you. Oh, where are you from? How long? Oh, where'd you used to go to church? Oh, you just moved here. And you'd have these conversations, and within 6 months, their story was completely different because their raw information got put in the system and then regurgitated to fit the narrative. And that happened to all of us.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is what Tom is doing. He is standing on stage and he's selling this story. I almost lost my house. I had to call the mortgage company and I had to work with them and tell them, I want to pay you. I just don't have the money to pay you right now. And all of this line of crap that he would spew from stage. But I never once stopped tithing. Through that whole time, I tithed. And I asked God, I want to tithe more. I wish I had more to give you, God. And God saved my house. God made it to where we had a roof over our heads. God gave us shelter, because doesn't God do that for all of his creation? And God helped me, and I stayed faithful, and I kept tithing. And now, look at me now. I can tithe well above 10% because God has given me such abundance. And so when you stand on stage and you spew that crap, it makes someone who is living paycheck to paycheck, someone who is really struggling, someone who is really on the verge of losing their house, make it seem so simple. You just give 10% of your money to the church. It doesn't matter if you can't pay your bills, because you're trusting that God's going to take care of you. It doesn't matter that you can't feed your children. You're trusting that God can take care of you. And it makes them feel like there is something wrong with their faith if they are freaking out about it. And so we are now living in the Tom is living his best life because he has stayed faithful to God, and he is giving his wife this house on the ridge, and he is from stage talking regularly that God has blessed them with this house and that they are going to use this house to bless others. And he talks constantly about how they're like putting in extra bedrooms to be able to help people. And the big thing that he talks about, because all of us have been going for the last year over to this person's house. The beer ministry is meeting at this person's house who has a pool in their backyard. And it is being said by the guy who owns that house that, like, oh yeah, he's not telling Tom that the guys are drinking beer in the garage. He's not telling Tom that, all of the stuff that's really going on. He's telling Tom, oh yeah, we're coming together and we're doing life together and it's beautiful and we're encouraging each other and we're discipling each other and holding each other accountable. And so Tom has a little bit of FOMO, I think. And Tom wants that for himself. So Tom decides he's not only putting in a pool in his backyard, Tom wants to put in a hot tub. And so they have built this house. It came with an unfinished basement. And so Tom is finishing out this basement with extra bedrooms. There's an extra kitchen downstairs. It's basically like a whole separate little apartment down there. And the big grand thing is he bought theater seats and put in like a little mini movie theater down there. And it walks out to the backyard. The basement opens out to the backyard and there's a pond with some koi fish in it. And Charlotte has her whole little gardening flower plant thing going on. And then they have this huge deck with a pool and a hot tub. So all of that is what Tom is working on, is the backyard and the basement at this time. So he is so distracted with all of that. For VBS, we can do whatever the hell we want because he's not there walking through on a daily basis. Like I said, we decorated on Sunday after church. He didn't even realize what we did till he walks in on Tuesday night. And also this summer, we do not do the big summer park event. And it is billed that we don't have, like, if God's not in it, then we aren't going to do it. And so if God's not showing us we need to do this, and there were plenty of people that were upset that we didn't do it, but...
Well, it was said there wasn't leadership for it. But I want to back up a little bit. Mom's group is still meeting while we are planning VBS. Most of Mom's group is participating in the planning for VBS. So because we have a lot of freedom, everyone is very excited, and that's why a lot of these big ideas are being done. Because we talked about how you knew how to tell your story. We also knew how to shut down anything that was going to be a no. There were certain things that were a no, and you just become aware of this as time goes on. And so usually Amanda and I were the ones that had to tell people no. So at Mom's group, you have this big idea. Well, no, that's not going to work because this one time we were doing this and da-da-da-da-da, and you sell this story. But most of the people in Mom's group have became upside down in our homes. I start making a giant batch of Kool-Aid to tell everyone that God's got it, just like Pastor Tom. I'm selling this. You need to be tithing regardless. Trust God. What's wrong with you? The lead of children's ministry at this time finds out, because she's in the office a lot, that there's some funny transactions with the house being built. This upsets her a lot because she is tithing above her means. Because even though from stage, Tom will talk about how he tithes more than 10%, He trusted God. His life is amazing. In the next few sentences, he will say, "We do not need your money." This is the best thing he ever says, because my husband ate this up. I don't need your money. It's like reverse psychology,
Yep.
basically. So we are tithing. I eventually end up working to tithe and then tithing above that too. Like, I pay to serve at this church at a certain point in time. But the lead of children's ministry finds out that stuff has been paid for. She's very upset because she is trying to prove that her income is very high. She's very spiritually mature, and she is tithing a crap load.
Because doesn't she see like an invoice or something for the hot tub?
Yes. And I saw the invoice. She shows me the invoice.
And it says that the church paid for the hot tub.
The invoice is the same amount that it would cost to put on the park event.
The park event money, there's a certain amount of park event money that is budgeted into the church budget. And then there's a lot more. It costs like 3 times as much as what the church budgets for. But it is a good chunk of money that the church budgets for this. And so if it's budgeted in December that we're doing the summer park event, and come like, April, May, when we should be planning this event, we decide we're not doing it. Now all of a sudden we have all this extra money. And this is the first time we realize that if we're not doing the summer park event, where is that money going? No one ever asked that question, but this is the first time we realize it's going somewhere and we just don't know where.
Right. Well, and
right.
It's said in budgeting meetings and stuff, whether it's at this time or later, because we were all involved in things like this at some point, like the budget is almost like just fictitious numbers on a page, and like the money will be there, or it's how we allot it. So it's all like, and I think we've talked about this before, like, in my opinion, it seems like the church operates off of like a slush fund where it just has money and it only goes where it needs to go when it needs to go there. So like, yeah. Right. And so it's always so interesting how the stories like don't always line up. Like they get close enough to make it all believable, but like there's always gaps and areas where things aren't exactly lined up. So it is interesting to see though that like we didn't do this summer park event, but yet they're like I don't know. It's just interesting where like, I mean, it's one thing to like, I don't know, maybe it's all wrong. Like if you think about it from a like, if you have a business, like, because let's just get rid of the whole spiritual Jesus Christian, let's just get rid of the whole moral compass in all of this and look at this as like just a business, and you judge from your own ethics and morality of like, do you use your business card to purchase things because you have tax exempt status? Is it okay to do it with groceries? Is it okay like, yeah, here, let me buy that for you because then I have tax exempt and like you can just pay me for it. Like, is that okay in any level? Is it okay to do it with a hot tub? Is it okay to like, and then what are the ramifications for your taxes later? Like having the church as like this is where you hear words like tax haven. I just try to.
Well, and here's the other big thing that also happens after the hot tub goes in at Tom's house. Tom decides the church needs a big electric sign. And he like you said, Brandi, he won't stand on stage and say like, I need you to give money to this. He phrases it in a way of like, we want to put this sign up. And he phrases it, it's very like,
it's a smoke show.
Old white boomer.
He's a good salesman.
Like it's like no one else in town will have a sign like this. There's one electronic sign downtown, and all it does is tell you the temperature. And why do you need to know what the temperature is? Your car tells you the time and temperature now. We want a sign that's going to tell people about us, and we want to be able to change it out. And he sells this big thing, and he stands there, and he's like, how amazing would it be that if your neighbor is having a bad day and you know it's their birthday, that you call the office and we'll put happy birthday neighbor like on the sign. And so they see it when they drive to work. And so like, this isn't just for our church to bring people to our church. This is to let the community know that God loves each and every one of them. And he really just starts driving this home in a very like passive aggressive way almost. He's asking people to pay for
that's
it.
why we didn't
And
do
so,
right. Isn't that why we didn't do the summer barbecue though? Because it was all about, I really seem to remember like there was some, now that you brought up the sign,
there was argument.
But there's no leadership.
Yes. So it started, there was no leadership, but there was arguments that were going on that, why do we need to pay for this? We didn't do the summer park event. Why don't we just use that money for that?
What it
and
was.
Tom's like, well, if God, it's for all of us. And God wants all of us to be invested. And he starts selling this, like, we're a family and we're invested and all of
You
this
gotta be
stuff.
all in.
And you got to be all in. And so people started questioning,
I remember that.
Why do I have to give money for
let's
a
just
sign?
use the park event money, but the park event money wasn't there.
Because he had already put in his damn hot tub.
It's a smoke show because it is. It's constantly, like I was just saying, the church operated on, and I told this in one other episode with the whole computer, where we had asked for a computer for our ministry, got given a hand-me-down one, and then the church got a new guitar. I mean, like, it's ridiculous. Like, and so it's a constant hand over hand smoke show. That's all it was. And we're distracted by a sign and everybody's like, yeah, we need a sign because look over here. Don't watch what the other hand's doing. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And then it's, I remember that. And everybody was like, and then that's when the budget was explained, that these numbers are not real, that money doesn't actually exist. It's what we think we're going to bring in. And then we start setting it aside when we need to. And then the money always goes, and it's a constant revolving budget. And that was the...
Yep. And if everyone would just tithe more, we could have the real budget that we put out in December.
I'm just going to stand back with my mouth open right
taxes.
now. Like,
Well, and we got to remember how much it costs to keep the lights and air conditioning on in the summertime. Mm-hmm. That building is expensive.
And this is why I'm getting my butt chewed, because we crank the AC in the sanctuary for Everest VBS to create this like cold Arctic environment, and I get my butt reamed. And so like for mom's group, this is why I have to start showing up and turning the heat and the air and stuff on, because we turned everything off until someone's in the building using it.
Right. And this is why I end up being the one that has to turn off all the AC and heat Thursdays and Sundays. And this is why I end up around the sound booth and the band, is because I'm waiting for you guys to leave so I can make sure everything's turned off. And that's how come I know how much the electric bill is, because it's thrown at me.
Yeah, Tom would scream it at us.
Yeah. That makes so much sense now. Like, from a worship team perspective of like, some of that though, like, is it...
Remember, I always wanted to unplug the cords and stuff. Remember, I'd be like, why do you guys have this plugged in?
Yeah. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, we would die. Like, you would have to be in there and then wait for the heat to come on or wait for it to get cold. We would be like dying.
Mm-hmm. But didn't you ever wonder why I would get on that stage and be talking to whoever the worship leader was at the time and saying, like, can't we unplug some of this stuff? Why do you have all this plugged in? Why do you need this plugged in right now?
That's crazy. Like, I didn't think, like, I'm so, like, oblivious to so much where I'm just like, okay, that's Brandy's job.
But why would you think that?
Yeah, but this is why people are so mad at us all the time, because we come off looking like Nazis over the randomest crap, and it's because we have Tom in the office screaming at us over the electric
and he
bill.
comes off as the whatever we need it, God will provide, and just turn it on.
So people are mad about this sign. There's grumbling.
I remember that
right?
being
People
a big
are
deal.
questioning.
Yeah.
So what do we do when everyone is upset? We do a whole sermon series about how we are a family. That summer, we do a whole sermon series about your church family. We are family. They even sing the song for worship. And then, because we didn't get the big summer park event, every September we have a potluck, a church potluck.
The membership picnic.
Well, this year we turn it into a picnic, and we go to a park, and it's a big potluck picnic.
The people, so these people are all in for this park picnic. And we actually have teams, because normally we don't have teams. Normally we just are like,
come after church
bring
on a
whatever you
Sunday,
want.
bring a dish to share. We're all going to
Bring
hang out
your
at the park. And this year
chairs.
was actually an organized event. It's probably the biggest one that we did. Yeah.
Because we have the tents, not like the big tent, but we have like the big shades up. There's a barbecue team. There's a game team. The women that run the kitchen coordinate the food. It's very, very organized. And it almost is like a mini summer event just for the church family, which now that you reminded me that everything was We Are Family, this is a big family reunion.
Yep.
Is what we're doing. And before we started, I pulled up pictures, and when you look at the pictures, all the main players are there. Die Hard, Come As You Are, people are all serving. And I noticed people have their orange shirts on.
Yep. They're all of their like big summer park event. We had the shirts. Yep. So you guys are really active in this picnic because you guys have been doing stuff in children's ministry. And as we're planning for this episode, I was like, this is really weird that I'm not a part of any of this. I didn't have anything to do with any of this. But I get so run down by doing Mom's Group and VBS and all the ministry stuff I'm doing and all of this stuff. I get pneumonia really bad. Tom's telling us we need to tithe more and we need to give to a sign, but I can't afford to go to the doctor. And so I don't go and I don't go and I don't go. And I end up in the emergency room and I have pneumonia in both lungs and I am so sick. And so it's like a while. It's like a month. I am like down for the count at home. And so you ladies that summer do one of the coolest things I think we've done in children's ministry. And I'm like, why didn't I participate in that? And that's because, I was sick. So you guys do your children's ministry thing.
Well, and like, I just want to point out before we even jump into this, that like from the VBS that happened at the beginning of June to this picnic that's going to happen in like early September-ish time, that's the only amount of time we're talking about. And this speaks to how quickly, like, and how fast, like you would have something happen and there'd be an idea. We would pivot so fast and build things so fast and then pivot and then boom, you're doing something else. But we were building things that you would think took a year, took like we did this for so long, or it took like we were building and rebuilding and building and rebuilding in like 3-month cycles, things that people would normally do in like year cycles. And so we had like multiple years within like a summer, like, and so from that VBS, because what happened is I talked about the fact that this group publishing did real worship songs and then they did motions and they had like a music video. And so it really went well. And it was very much like a great springboard for, I was allowed to do children's worship because the way the worship team worked essentially was if you were going to be on the stage with Pastor Tom, you needed to be a musician. You needed to have perfect timing, perfect pitch. You needed to be a perfect musician to be on the Sunday stage. There was no room on the Sunday stage to learn or grow or like any of that. And I'm big on growing people into things, but you were either allowed to, if you needed to practice or you needed to get better, like you could be on Thursday because like 10 people show up, so we don't care. Or, you know, if you want to be in children's ministry, you know, like you were allowed to participate, like, because kids don't count. So whatever, they can listen to bad music. And it's not that the music was bad. It's just like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, if you were a drummer and you didn't have perfect timing and you missed a few beats here and there, you weren't good enough for a Sunday. You could be in children's worship. Or if you were a guitar player, like, because so much of it is free form music, but there was no room for it not to be perfect. And in the Sunday worship team, it had to be exactly like the recording that Tom put out. Like he was like, this is the order, this is the version, this is the way it's going, and you could not stray from that. There was no free form music in Sunday worship. It was exactly like it was written on the paper, or you weren't good enough to be on that stage.
And we talked about that in a previous episode too, about like how Tom really didn't have the musical skill to be able to change on a whim. He had to learn it exactly like the recording. And he'd be
frustrated if you changed it because he practiced every single day, all day long to play it exactly the way it was recorded or presented. And then you change it on him. He was like, why did I practice all so well, then don't practice.
Yeah.
But, so anyway, so there was a group of us that were children's worship people. And so, but Everest VBS is the catalyst that was like the way that they did that. We were able to take those songs and then add our own songs. And we really focused children's worship on Sunday around like the kids knew these motions. So now we just built on that. And we started to find worship songs that really translated more and resonated more with kids. And so we began to do children's worship. And it was some of the worship team, and then it was Froggy and me. And this was definitely a platform for Froggy to shine because he could be billed as like this was his thing. This is what he's doing. Him and his wife are doing this. And but it was really one of the guitarists and I, like within the worship team, there were like these micro cells. And so we really jived. We got along and we had the same styling of music that we liked. And we really liked to have fun and just play and worship. And so we just took over this children's worship. And so this is, you gotta remember, this is the beginning of June. So at some point, so then Brandi, you were in children's ministry at this time, right? Teaching in a classroom, and you were all for it. You're like, this is great. The kids worship is great. The kids are loving it. And so then we took it to the next level between the two of us. And it was like, okay, well, and this, you got to remember, this is just for the summer. This is just this summer. And so however many Sundays that is, by that time, we were like, we're going to do themes, and we were coordinating. Like if they're talking about this verse in the classrooms, like what's the main theme of the curriculum, then we'll talk about it from stage for the kids worship. And we were going to build this big children's worship platform, which I was all about. So by the time we get to this church picnic, one of the weeks we got to Jesus Was My Superhero. And I think this was like a big thing within church culture at this time. It wasn't like just our church, but like there was a song, Jesus Is My Superhero. And so, and Brandi did like special curriculum for all the classrooms, and all the classrooms did like their masks. And then the worship team wore superhero shirts. And then it took
the youth
everybody
to worship,
gravitated towards it.
So, and they had their superheroes, so the kids were like, oh my gosh, the rock stars are here.
My favorite superhero is Spider-Man, and that teenage boy is wearing a Spider-Man shirt, and he told me my Spider-Man shirt was cool.
Yeah, it took off. Like, it became something we couldn't do it every Sunday, but it became like...
Well, when you brought in that curriculum, I was all excited because we had a theme, we had cohesion. It cut down hours of children's planning, because now we could all be on the same page instead of 75 different ideas. And we advertised this to the families that came to the VBS. So right after VBS, some of them come for a few Sundays and then they drop off, and it's always hard to get them to come back. So we tell them, all you have to do, come on Sunday, wear your superhero shirt, then we're gonna have a picnic, everything's free, just bring your family. And so that Sunday, we have extra masks made, so because we made them, I think, the week before and kept them in the classroom, so the kids decorated them. And then as you come in that Sunday, you were given a mask, and we're hyping this up. And worship was really, really big that Sunday because the youth are there. Some of the youth are on stage. The youth are in the classrooms. The youth are actually checking the kids in as they come into the gym. So it looks to these parents like we do a mini VBS
every Sunday. Yeah, and that's exactly what I was talking about. Like, you think about, we pivoted instantly on these things. It was like somebody got an idea and we ran with it and built what most people would build in a year, in 3 months.
Well, and this is the other part, that this is why people got so frustrated, because we lived in this constant, like, you can't plan anything out, because if you try to plan stuff out too far in the future, then you get in trouble. You don't know what God is doing. You're trying to direct God's steps. You're trying to plan out before. And Tom would constantly say, like, I don't know what the next sermon series is going to be until I finish this one. I have to wait until I hear from God. And like, it made it seem like your faith and your trust in God was hearing from God in that moment and being able to, oh, we're doing, like, let's do superheroes. Oh my gosh, this is so cool. And then everyone's throwing in ideas. Well, if you're not in the room when it happens, you miss it. And then you're mad.
Where were you? You missed what God was doing.
You left me out. Well, you're not including me. So then you're getting yelled at because you're not including other people. Well, what are we supposed to do? Like, on a Sunday afternoon, call people and be like, hey, we just had this great idea. If you want to come be a part of it, come be a part of it, because then people are going to be annoyed that we didn't plan this out. And now I don't have childcare, or I had plans and I don't get to be a part of it. And there's always a reason. And all of us are being billed as though we take over everything, when in all reality, we're doing what we're being taught. We are listening to what we think is God in the moment, and we're just running with it because that's what Tom is teaching us.
Yeah, and because it's got to be so extravagant, like, at every moment. And like Brandi said, we within 6 weeks, we're all on board for having a VBS, what you do in a week, once a year, every Sunday.
And like you said, Amanda, the people getting mad, well, the people in charge of this, myself, Melissa, and the guitar guy, all have ADHD. So this is a humongous dopamine hit of chaos and adrenaline to pull this off.
Yeah.
And we thrive. Melissa and I thrive. The smaller a window to get it done, we will make magic. Give us 2 years to get it done.
Yeah, we're project-based. We need a start and an end, and you want me to do what? I will not only see your expectation, I am going to exceed your expectation by miles, because that's my dopamine adrenaline rush, and then I'll crash and burn afterwards. But that doesn't matter. Let's not talk about that.
And that's why it was so weird that I'm like, this seems like something I would be a part of. Not because I have ADHD, but because, like, that chaos, like, that unlocks a different part of my brain. It's like I walk in and I see a mess and I'm like, ooh, I get to organize it. And it doesn't have to be my way. I feel like I could definitely walk into something and be like, okay, where are you going with this? Okay, have we thought about doing X, Y, and Z to kind of like make it flow a little better? And like take everything that's all crazy and be like, okay, like let's just kind of like line all of our stuff up a little bit, and then it all will flow a lot better. And so that's why it was like really weird that I wouldn't be a part of it, because this seems like something I would have loved the crap out of.
And in defense of you saying I don't have to control everything, we would bring you the problems that we couldn't fix. But the thing is, this window is so small.
Yeah.
Melissa and I don't lose focus, so we don't need you to fix it.
Burning Butterflies is a listener-supported podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our amazing supporters on Patreon.
Follow the link in our show notes to learn how you can become a Patreon supporter too. Supporters get exclusive access to bonus content each month, including outtakes, cut content, and supporter-only episodes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating on your listening platform.
Burning Butterflies is a production of Asha Media. Thank you for listening.